Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Abrahamson, and I'm the director of the Black Hills Knowledge Network, which is a local community information project that is, if I get this down far enough, that it represents a collaboration between, I think we're up to 10 public libraries and communities here in the Black Hills, along with the Black Hills Area Community Foundation. We are about 3 years old now, launched to try and create an online community information hub here in the Black Hills. And two kind of main reasons for trying to create this project. One is that we know that the marketplace for news and information and community information is changing dramatically as people go to all sorts of different places like Facebook or online or cable providers, lots of places besides their local newspaper and their local television station to get information and news. And so a lot of people are not finding out what's going on in their own community. So we're trying to work with local content providers, work with local media, working with local governments and local nonprofits to create one place where people can find the information they need. When we first launched this program, we talked about it as a local Google. I'm not sure we're really up to that. But it is part of our aspiration to be able to find a place where you can get all the information you need. One of the things we say is that in the age of Google, the hardest information to find is local. And I won't go into all the reasons for that, but it is true that you can find what's going on in China a lot easier than you can find out what's going on in Belfouche. And so there's a reason for that, and we're trying to meet that gap. The other reason is that one of the things that we know is that communities respond much more quickly and much better to problems and to opportunities when information cycles quickly through a community. And so we talk about that if you want an innovative community, if you want a community that's responsive, it needs to have a good, healthy information ecology. And libraries are at the heart of what that information ecology looks like. Tonight we're very fortunate to have from Douglas County, Colorado, Jamie LaRue to come up and talk to us because across the country he's one of the foremost speakers, thinkers about the future of libraries, and particularly about how they deal with the rapidly changing digital environment in which we're all in. Jamie took over the management of the Douglas County Libraries in 1990s, at a time when it was considered one of the worst library systems in Colorado. In 2009, it was named the best library system in the country for communities 250,000 to 500,000 people. So he's going to talk a little bit about how he sees the future of libraries. So let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about today and tomorrow in the libraries. I've put out some handouts here to kind of give you a brief way to talk about this. For those of you who didn't get one, you get one later. It's just hang along with the ride. What I want to start off talking about first is the kinds of things that we do. And as I mentioned in the earlier group, I got together with my trustees and I said, they said to me, how do we explain what the role of the library is in the 21st century? And I said, well, I can give you all of the numbers, and the main thing we do is we check things out. And then we have people who come to visit us. We have people who want to use our technology within the library. We have people who come to programs. I said, but here's the short version of that. It is the job of the public library to provide access to the intellectual content of our culture. We are where you come to find out what are people talking about? What change is happening? How do I stay in touch with my community? So when I gave all these numbers to my board, they said, and maybe this is true for your libraries too, you give us so many statistics. Librarians love to count, right? We track all of our statistics and our numbers, and we present the report on a monthly basis to the trustees. And so I went back to a friend of mine, Keith Lance, who was actually he was a head statistician for the Colorado State Library. And I said, Keith, I give 40 numbers a month to my trustees. And they said, oh, this one went down. Is that bad? So trying to figure out what's the context of this information. And I said, what are the numbers that matter? What are the measures that actually mean something? And he came back and he says, oh, that's a good question. And he finally came back and he said, I think there are just 4. And if I know these 4 numbers, I can predict the performance of any library of any size. And I said, what are they? And he said, the first one is circulation per capita, the number of items that get checked out divided by your population. The average across the United States is now 7. So that is to say, it's as if every citizen within a service area checks out 7 books in the space of a year. In Douglas County, they check out 27. The next number is visits per capita. So how many people, again, number of people who come through the door, divided by the population. I don't actually want to use this, is that okay? I still hear that kind of fuzziness. So that tells you how popular you are as a destination. And then the next one was the program attendance per capita. Again, how many people are coming to the various kinds of exercises, meetings, discussions, lifelong learning that happen in the library. And then finally, it was staff per 1,000 served. And I recognize when you get to smaller communities of 1,000, it's hard to really pump this number up. But the point is, for most businesses, they would say, run lean, right? Have very few people. But in libraries, it is one of the predictors of success. You don't want to have too few people, because one of the reasons you come to the library is for personal service. And if you have people who are smiling and ready to greet you, and they are eager to talk to you, then that's better service. So a reminder out there to trustees, it is not your goal to have a depopulated library. You want it to be friendly and popular and approachable, and you want people to be there to greet you. One of the things that I also have been talking about a lot with my friends who are educators is they say, we're noticing that there's a trend going on in the country. And it's almost as if there's a lot of anger against public education. We see a rise in homeschoolers. We see a rise in charter schools. And I'm here to tell you, the libraries are very much in the heart of that revolution as well. What we've learned is, I remember the first time this happened, I was at the Greeley Public Library, used to be the director there, and a woman came in with 5 kids, and it was the middle of the day, and I said, oh, is it a holiday? And she said, no, we're homeschoolers. I said, oh, really? Tell me about that. I said, so are you a teacher by training? And she said, no. So I went to college. And I said, well, why did you do this? And she said, I'm just having so much fun. And so I got interested in that and started studying up on it and discovered that homeschoolers tend to outperform public school students across the board for education. Because if you think about it, the class size is pretty good. And the teacher-student ratio. And you never have to do homework because the mother knows how well you do. There's a class because she knows. So when I spoke about the social aspect of this, it turns out there's research about that. Homeschoolers do quite well because they talk with their parents. They have to educate, and they talk to people who are more anxious. So that was interesting. We looked at this and said, so how then well cuts across your entire community, gives you a slice of every demographic group. In times of economic recession, library use increases. That makes sense, right? You're going to borrow what you can't buy. You're going to hang out to look for a job if you don't have a job. In times of recession, where do you want your business to be? Right next to the busiest place in town. And so one of the things that I talked about with many of our local communities is something that Mayor Daley in Chicago discovered. He had all these broken neighborhoods, and he stepped in to say there were 3 things that could fix them. First, he put a library in troubled communities. It put the eyes on the street, it reduced crime, it brought in lots of young people, it brought in the right mix of people walking around downtown. Then he brought in public transportation, then he brought in the park. And it stabilized neighborhoods, make them smarter and safer. This is something that we don't talk about very often. And I believe that libraries need to get downtown, in the heart of their communities, rather than allowing ourselves to be pushed out way on the edge of town, so people can walk to us, so people can see us, so we can generate traffic for our neighbors. The other thing that I was going to talk about the halo effect. A lot of interesting studies have happened over the past 5-6 years. The halo effect is this. Every time somebody goes to the library, they wind up going somewhere else. And when they go somewhere else, the average cost, they spend $25 on a library trip. And those of you who are parents know this. Children, let's go to the library. Can we have some ice cream? Right? And so this idea about having library visits, it generates economic activity within the rest of the community. We should talk about that too. And then one of the things I've been intrigued by is that even when many businesses were closing, the fastest growing sector of the American economy has been the small office, home office. So somebody gets laid off and they say, I'm tired of the rat race, I'm going to create my own business. Where do they go if they want to create their business? They come to the library. I remember hearing this discussion with a man who had been laid off. He came and he said, I'm going to get into the business of concrete tile roofs. And one of my reference librarians says, I can give you the name of every competitor within 75 miles. Not a bad return on your tax dollar. And so we help people write business plans. And so if you think about it this way, one of the things that library does, that the public library does, to contribute to the economic health of its community is help people create businesses. Help them put their business plan together. Help them do the competitive research and say, where's the audience for this particular topic? The other thing that I heard is we started working with our economic development councils and chambers. This business term called the gazelle. So you have built your home-based business. In fact, I heard about one person who was doing biological research in his basement, which sounded like a really bad idea. Like it's going to go into somebody's sewer, and we're going to have mutations. But he said, okay, we've now gotten to the point where we think we're ready to grow the business. Because what does a community, what's good for a community, is to have somebody move out of the basement, hire somebody, and rent office space downtown. That's called a gazelle. They're leaping up, and they're joining the larger business community. And so our library has been approaching the chambers of commerce to say, we will provide business support for you. We will do marketing, training for you. We'll do database access to you, so you can find out about all these things involving how do I build an HR department to manage the new employees that I've never dealt with before? How do I figure out a way to partner with other agencies? What partnership opportunities might there be with the state? So this kind of coaching is something we've been very active in. I'm also pleased to report that one of our business librarians, we sent her off to work with us, and she took a writing a business plan class downtown Denver. And isn't it great that a public library reference librarian won the Best Business Plan of the Year award for the launching of what we call BizInfo, our business information service and support. The other thing that we're seeing is about workforce development. And so just out of curiosity, has there been much activity with Gates money to open up computer labs? in South Dakota?
Daria would best know.
Not much?
Daria? No,
Okay.
Department of Labor is working with us.
Well,
They're
and-
pleased with what we've got.
And they should be working with you, because what they love about working with us is we are safe places. And it's not, when people come to the public library, they feel righteous about it, as well they should. And if there's good technology and, you've got broadband and you have people who are eager to help you learn how to do things, we can provide the skills that people need to find jobs. Again, from about 2007 through 2010, one of the fastest growing services that libraries provide has been this: you come in, you need to retool because you've lost your position. We help you write your resume. We help you look for the job online. We help you submit the application online. And we give you a cookie when you get the job. So, it's a wonderful kind of support for people looking for work. The other thing I want to talk about is this whole notion about civic engagement. And I feel that as a baby boomer myself, I come from the generation, and I consider us institution destroyers. I remember growing up at a time when my mother was a nurse in World War II, my father was a seaman. And they grew up in a time where I remember them saying to me, you can't fight City Hall. They were civically very engaged, because when you grow up in the middle of a war, you believe in the chain of command, right? We won the war. And when baby boomers came along, we had a very different approach to this, raised on Dr. Spock, no doubt. When we were told you can't fight City Hall, we said, what do you mean? There's a sit-in at City Hall. I'm going to City Hall. You can't tell me what to do. Question authority. And I think one of the characteristics of the boomers has been, if someone says, you need to do this, we say, well, how does that apply to me? You need to, if there's a conflict between institutional values and personal values, you have to change. And I think you see this played out in baby boomers' reactions to schools, baby boomers' reactions to libraries, very little civic engagement for almost a whole generation. I see now that the tide is starting to turn. When I look at my own children, millennials, they grew up collaboratively. And it's fascinating to me is that I remember my mother saying that when she was a young woman and they would go out dancing, they went out in groups. Baby boomers, we did not go out in groups. We went out one or two at a time. And now, I remember watching my daughter at the age of 14, 5 of us are going out, and as a father of a daughter, I liked that. I thought that was good. And I was seeing kind of a new discovery of you grow up together, you talk together, you share together, a Facebook generation. Eric and I were talking about this earlier. When I went away to college, I changed my name and my personality because nobody knew me. When my son went away to college, every friend he knows went with him. Right? They're immediately connected on telephone, they're immediately connected on Facebook, and I begin to see a rise in a different way of thinking about volunteering. That my son and my daughter believe that they're supposed to make the world better, and they're willing to give their time locally to improve their local institutions. And so I think the library is one of the last places left in many of our communities where you can walk in the door, you are welcomed, you don't have to spend anything. People are pleasant to you. You can gather in spaces and talk. And whether it's a civic group like Rotary or the Optimists, it's a homeowners association getting together to talk, it's the Boy Scouts, it's the Girl Scouts, it's a book club. One of the roles that we need to claim consciously is that we stitch our communities together. I mentioned this morning that I stood outside our library for a while trying to do surveys of people who believe it. And I would say, tell me everything you did. And the third thing they did was they showed up to talk to somebody. First they came to check out a book, then they came to bring it back, then they came to talk to somebody. And so a main point to underscore here, first thing, the value proposition of the library is that nobody can afford to buy everything they want. Right? If you're a reader, or you look at magazines, or you listen to music, or you watch movies, no one can afford to buy everything they want. The public library is a cooperative purchasing agreement. You give us pennies on the dollar, we give you access to as much as you can consume. That value proposition doesn't change just because it was moved from print to an e-book. Same thing. We had a man who was 72 years old, walked into the library one day. He said, Jamie, I'm worried about you. I hope you have a backup career. I said, why is that? And he said, because my wife bought me a Kindle for Christmas. And he said, and I wake up at 4 in the morning because I can't sleep, and I reach up into the air and I pull down a book. It's right there, 24/7. He said, you can't do that. And I said, well, in the first place, yes, I can. Our library also is one of the first libraries in the United States. We purchased our own ebook management system. We can do it just as well as Amazon. He said, well, no, I'm just looking at this. I don't think I need to come to the library anymore, so I hope you have a backup career. And so he walked out, and I said, you'll be back. And about 3 months later, he did come back for 2 reasons. First, he said, I bought all these ebooks, and I'm done with them, and I would like to give them to you, because I'm not going to read them anymore. And then he made a discovery. He doesn't own those books. When you buy a book from Amazon, you are leasing access to it. But the license agreement in the Kindle says you can't give it to somebody. You can't share it. You know, now they have launched a program where you can give it to one person for 2 weeks, whether or not they finish it. And I started thinking, when I was a child and my grandfather died, I inherited about 500 books. Little Journeys to the Homes of the Great, The History of Civilization, the Harvard Classics. Those books changed my life. Those books warped me forever. And I think of it this way, if all you have is all you have is books you bought for your dog, books you bought from iTunes, books you bought from Amazon, when you die, your library dies free. You can't hand a book over to somebody else, because one of the problems that we face in libraries now is 3 significant business problems. We gave up ownership. Many libraries try to buy ebooks through Overdrive, 3M, EBSCO-host, some of the vendors that have come in to sell to libraries. Don't let us have them. They retain them. Second, we've given up discounts. The value of a cooperative purchasing agent, like the library, is we buy so many things, we get discounts. My library gets a 45 to 50% discount on print. What those of you who use Overdrive for ebooks now, you're spending a premium. I mentioned Gone Girl, which is one of the New York Times bestsellers. Sells to a consumer for, I think it's $11.99 from Amazon. If the library buys it, it's $84. $84 for one copy, and we don't own it. And if I decide at some point to sever my relationship with Overdrive and leave, then I leave all of my books behind me. The third issue is integration. You may have noticed that corporations like to own things. And Amazon really likes this idea that if you buy a Kindle, you can only buy books from them. You can only read their things. You're stuck there. Overdrive, if you want to search the books that they sell to libraries, you go to the Overdrive site. You can't come back and check your library account to see if you have fines or something or what print you have. It's a separate account. If you also buy from 3M, to get the books that Overdrive doesn't have, now you have to go to the 3M site. This splintering of a library experience means that we're handing over our public role, help people find things, make it easy. We're handing them over to corporations who want to own you and who want to have all of that user information that they do not share back to the library. That's a business problem. And it's an issue that public libraries, academic libraries, school libraries have to challenge face on, because we're losing our purchasing power, we're losing the ability to manage our own collections, and we cannot sit back passively as victims of the marketplace. We must step up and become active within the marketplace. So I'll pass this on to your state librarian. Wonderful opportunity for a statewide consortium. All that's required is enough money to buy this server, buy the computer equipment, set up the connections to the libraries, and start buying books yourself, managing them yourselves. Again, our choice is passive loss of revenue, loss of purchasing power, or an active step where we step up to the table and say, we can buy our own books, we can work with new players in the publishing field, and we can continue to provide access to our communities. Another issue I touched on a bit this morning is the rise of new kinds of publishing. There are 5 publishers in the United States that are responsible for over 50% of the purchases libraries make. HarperCollins, Random House, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, and a 5th that I cannot recall right now. But they take 50% of our budgets, and they account for about 60% of our use. Well, since ebooks came along, 2 huge trends have occurred. One of them is the independent publishers, the regional publishers, small publishers, specialty publishers, who never used to be able to distribute enough copies worldwide or around the nation, now realize that they produce it as a file. It's pretty easy to email a file. And so they are now producing as many books as the big commercial publishers in a year. Then there's self-published authors. It used to be maybe 40,000 a year that would come out as vanity presses. People would write a book, they would pay somebody to publish it for them, they would have 1,000 copies that stayed in their garage until they died. Vanity publishers, not vetted in any way, not approved by a publisher. Well now, if you've been a successful way, you know how to produce a book, you found your audience, let's say you write vampire romances, and it's amazing how many people do. Once you find your audience, you don't actually need a publisher anymore. You just do your, write your book, send out the email to your website, say you can get it from this particular publisher, and now instead of getting 10% of the sale, which is what the big publishers are, you get 70% through Amazon, 85% through Smashwords, or if the library hosts your file, we'll sell it for you. You get 90%, and the library gets 10%. There is an opportunity here, instead of sitting passively at the end of a distribution chain, to start moving upstream, to get closer to the creators of this content. And I believe this is the future of the library. We move from just being a place at the very end to much closer, much friendlier with the author. How many of you know the name C.J. Box? Okay, very popular author. Right? Actually, I have a funny story about him. I was speaking at a place, and he was speaking, this was up in Idaho, and he was sitting around a table, and he was talking with a number of people, a woman in her 80s, and he was saying that he writes a book about a game warden and some of the things, and mysteries that he solves. And all of a sudden, the woman looked very affronted. And C.J. Box said, "I'm sorry, did I say something to offend you?" And she said, "I am not interested in reading about gay Mormons." He said, "No, game warden." But when he came to our library, one of the things that we did was, we brought him in to do a talk about his books, about writing, interesting, entertaining guy, and we had 500 people who showed up to hear this author, who wanted to get close to this author. He signed a lot of books, sold a lot of books, and we wound up putting C.J. Box, all of the books he had ever written, back on the local bestseller list. And so I remind you that one of the powerful things that public libraries do is to market authors. Why does somebody come to a library? They have a passion for reading. They're curious about the world. And if we can make common cause with the people who create the content, and we can hook them together, then the two that matter most, creator of content, consumer of content, are the ones that really are significant. Well, let's think about how things have worked in the past. There were 7 links in the chain. Somebody writes a book. They find an agent. And the reason they need an agent, I've been surprised to find out, is it's not just to help them find a publisher. They manage the foreign rights. They manage the various rights of different editions. A good friend of mine is Connie Willis. She's a science fiction author. And she said she makes more of her money on overseas sales. And her agent manages this idea of, even if it's an English version in Spain, it's a different edition, and the agent manages that. So they have a reason to be in the ecosystem. Then it goes to a publisher. And if you're a first-time author, publishers contribute a tremendous amount. My first book, I went to Libraries Unlimited. I said, I have all of these words, but I don't know how to turn it into a book. And the editor said, let me read it. I think I see 8 chapters. The logic is like this. And she would call me on a regular basis to say, is it done yet? And so eventually I did manage to work through and write the book. Then they bring in a copy editor to go through and clean up all those grammatical mistakes, and to design a book, and to design a cover, and to put the index together, and to help me sell it. Put it in publisher catalogs, put it on Facebook, and begin to do this marketing. So a publisher can add value. Then it goes, if you're to a distributor, they print the thing up, they ship it around the country, it goes to a library distributor, it goes to a reviewer, because libraries tend not to buy books that haven't been reviewed. And then finally, it's the reader, 7 links in the chain. Well, what do we do if we can't get reviews? If there are now so many books being written that they can't stay on top of the reviews, the ecosystem breaking down. What do we do if we go to the distributor, Overdrive, and 50% of the books on the New York Times bestseller list are not available for libraries? They won't sell them to us. Won't. That's never happened. Well, maybe you go around the publisher. Maybe you go directly to the author, and you say to someone, you already have an audience. What do you need a publisher for? Would you sell directly to libraries? This is a moment of disruption caused by technology. Right? E-books are changing everything. And if we are passive, we will get locked out of this market. We will spend more and get less. If we are active, we can step into the heart of this revolution, make common cause with the authors, and help people find them. Now, what does that mean for libraries? 2 things. First, we are not technologically as sophisticated as we need to be. We need more technology people on our staffs. And that means we have to reach out to a much younger crowd. We have to provide internships that are associated with universities to say, we desperately need your help to begin to build systems so we are not so dangerously dependent on companies that are cutting the public out of the picture. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think we need to embrace the role of marketing. A good friend of mine, Joyce Meskis, runs one of the best independent bookstores in Denver. It's called Tethered Cover. And the reason it's so good, I think, in part, is because she sort of runs it like a library. You know, the first time when you walk in there, you look around, you see rocking chairs and couches. You sit down, pull a book off. You can read it all afternoon, put it back on the shelf, and leave if you don't buy it, and you're perfectly welcome. What is the difference between the look of a space of a bookstore and the look of a space of a library? Face out, right? If you walk into a bookstore, what you're seeing is the covers. The covers sell books. For too long, librarians have been very formalistic. You walk into our libraries and you see the edges of a book, the least interesting part. We could make it worse, I suppose, by doing the back edge. But one of the things that I'll offer to you as just a simple way to increase the number of books you put in people's houses is just to say on every single shelf there will be one face-out book. One face-out book. And we started doing this and saw the use of our library increase by 15%. And now when we send somebody go through, whether it's a volunteer or a shelver, You don't, all they do is say, oh, there's no book there, and they put one there that has a cover, and then it disappears. The role of the public library is to promote literacy. I'll mention a study that I talked about this morning because it still blows my mind. And that's that in 2010, the results of a 20-year, 13-country study was published by the University of Las Vegas. And what they found was this: the greatest predictor of your life success, how long you live, whether or not you're going to go to jail, your educational attainment, and how much money you make, is predicted by your 4th grade reading scores. 4th grade. The greatest predictor of your 4th grade reading scores is your reading readiness by kindergarten. If you show up ready to read, you can get to that 4th grade proficiency. Greatest indicator of whether or not you'll be ready by the time you're 5 is the number of books in your home. If between the ages of 0 and 5, you had 500 books in your home, it's as good as having 2 parents with master's degrees. So if I were to say, what's the cheapest way you can make a smarter, healthier, wealthier community? The answer is, get as many books in kids' houses as possible. How do you do that? You get them to come to the library, you tell them stories, and you start claiming your role as marketer. The product that we're pushing is literature, is language. The power of the children's story time cannot be overestimated. I mentioned this morning that one of the big findings is between the ages of 0 and 2, the thing that turns on the brain is language, words. The more words you hear, the smarter you get. And I also think, this whole thing about, what do they call it, sociopaths, people who just are not kind to other people. If you grow up listening to stories, you learn from your earliest age to imagine yourself inside somebody else's life. Man, that's hard. Because then you can't be as cruel to people if you can imagine waking up inside somebody else's life. Story times may be the best investment in the future of our nation that we have. So where am I? Down to literacy and brain development. I want to talk about something else that I'm saying because it kind of gets to the notion of community engagement, demonstrating value. We have started putting our reference librarians to require them to spend 10% of their time out of the building. And I recognize that if you only have one librarian, it's difficult to get them out of the building. But then what you do is you approach volunteers. Because here's one of the things we found. This morning I described the case of a downtown that got ripped up and we're going to put it together. Our librarians helped local business people figure out how to design a downtown that would be more effective. We did the research for them and presented it to them. In Colorado, there's been some interesting legislation over the past couple of years trying to legalize marijuana. And first it began with making marijuana medical dispensaries. There was a reason Denver is called the Mile High City, doing its best to promote validation. But one of the things that they found when they were doing this is that immediately 400 of these sprung up in the city of Denver. And a lot of our public entities were saying, how do you regulate and manage that? One of my librarians said, well, here's what I'll do. I'll take this as a research project. And she called around to 69 different cities and said, what are you doing to regulate this? She produced a chart. She gave it to every one of the town councils within our county. It went viral. We sent it everywhere. It flew around the state of Colorado, demonstrating that a bit of timely research that is presented to decision makers, here's the information you need to make a good decision, can have a powerful effect on a whole state. I got so intrigued by this idea about community reference questions. We're used to individual reference questions. Somebody comes up and they ask a librarian a question, you give them an individual answer. But there are questions in our community that no one asks, that are significant to the life of our towns. And we don't know about them. It would never occur to them to take it to the library. So I sat down with my staff one day and I said, is it possible for us to come up with the names of all the movers and shakers in our town, in our county? And we just started brainstorming. who do you know that is a decision maker, that is a civic leader? And I find that even if you're not a civic leader yourself, you usually know one or two, right? Because you've seen them around town. And so we started brainstorming. And first we come up with, okay, there are elected officials. Got it. Although they're not all civic leaders. Second was, well, what about business leaders? We have people who are in charge of the growth and development of our economies. We could typically name some of those. What about the nonprofits? What about the foundation directors? What about these people that are constantly networking to understand our community's issues? What about faith-based? What about our religious community? What can we learn from them? What about our civic leaders? Rotary, Optimists, people that are volunteering in our community. And so we came up with a list of about 40 people. And I said, okay, now in teams of 2, I'm sending our reference librarians out to conduct an in-depth reference interview with these leaders. You have 3 questions. Take them out to lunch and they would say, you are a civic leader. We know that you talk to so many people that you're gathering wisdom. You are making meaning from all this conversation. So our first question is, who are your constituents and what do you think what are their issues over the next 2 years? And then we listened and we wrote it down. And then the second question was, what decisions are you going to have to make as a civic leader over the next couple of years? And what information do you wish you had before you made that decision? And third was, who else should we talk to? And what I found was when I sent out these first 2 librarians, I had one librarian who said, you know, this isn't my job. I didn't sign up for this one. This is not what I went to library school for. You know, I'm comfortable staying behind this desk and answering questions. I'm not sure we should be doing this alone. And when she went out, we sent her out to talk to the superintendent or somebody, and she came back and she said, you know, everybody should be doing this. Because I learned so much, I had no idea. And so after we pooled all of this information together, we put together a big chart to say it looks like there were 6 common issues that everyone, all the civic leaders in our community, were deeply concerned about. Now, I'm not saying that all of those issues were things that the library could help with. But here's the contribution we made to our community. First, we put the library on their radar. When you talk to a civic leader, you say, I have come to you because you are wise. They like that. They say, these library people are pretty smart. And so now and after you ask all these questions, intelligent questions, write down the answers, they start asking you questions. So what is the library doing about e-books? How many children come to your programs? And now you have reminded them that the library is a community asset. That when community issues come up, instead of trying to force your way to the table, you can be invited to the table because you reached out to them to find out what issues they had and try to figure out how you could solve their problems. I believe that this is a fundamental shift in the way that libraries have operated for a long time. We have said to our community, please help us. What if the right answer is, how can we help you? Because the best way to earn long-standing support is to demonstrate your value to someone, not try to persuade them that you know. Other thing I think I'll try to end with this and take some questions is I was fascinated that there were several studies that have been done now. One in Wisconsin, one in Colorado, one in Florida, and I believe one in California, where the question was, what is the return on investment for libraries? You know, we talk about this in business terms all the time. And so the idea is, you know, you put an average dollar amount into your library. And in fact, let me do a quick little check just to get some information. How many of the people in this room have internet access at home? What does it cost you per month in that? Right. What's the average price? 40 bucks? 45? Can I get 60? Colorado, it's like 40 to 80 a month, okay? And how many of you have cable TV or satellite TV? Okay, what's it cost you per month?
60.
50? Okay. I live in the hometown of DirecTV. You can get it for $300 a month. Yeah, with all the channels, and there are many, many people who do it. How many of you have cell phones, smartphones? Okay, per month? 45. Range in Colorado is at its 35 at the bottom end, and if you have teenagers who text, it's 150. Okay? What do you think the average household spends per month on library?
Is it like 50 cents a day?
You mean,
$2.58 per month. Now, isn't it fascinating that when I ask that question, the first thing that you think is, I have no idea, right? Because you get a bill for all those other things for once a month, and you know. And when I say to people, okay, so you have internet access at home, and you have TV, and you have cell phones, and maybe you have a Netflix subscription, but why do you do that? And they say, well, I do it, of course, for education, because I'm not watching pro wrestling. And then you say, okay, and I also get entertainment, because yes, I watch pro wrestling, and it's hilarious. Okay? And then you say the third thing is, I pay for these things because I want connection. I have internet access because I want to watch my grandchildren on Facebook. And then I say, and what do these expenditures do for your community? But for the library, for $2.58 per month, you do get education, you do get entertainment, you do get connection. And the price is far, far less than what you pay for all those other things, and far, far more powerful. That little exercise is called resetting the frame on the value. You're used to spending all this money for other things. What about the value of the library? Well, back to the ROI studies. They went back and said there are several factors. What's the value of the services that you do? What about the number of people that you employ? Is anybody who works for the public sector, you've heard someone say, I pay your salary, right? Say, yes, you do. Did I pay yours? Because I have children who needed braces, dentists, ka-chink, right? The idea is we're an interlocked community. Everybody pays everybody's salary. If you pay taxes to the library and you employ somebody, they buy products all the way around you. Second one is, libraries buy products. We buy paint, we build things within our libraries, we buy equipment, we buy furnishings. Money that you spend on the library doesn't disappear. It comes back to the community. And then there's the halo effect that I talked about. You go to a trip to the library, you spend more money. And then finally, that value for the collection. If I get the value of 27 checkouts per person for $2.58 a month, that's the cost of one hardback book, and they got 27. So across the country, the numbers coming back to say, for every dollar that is invested in a public library, the return is between $5 and $8. I don't know how your stocks are doing, but I believe that that's not a bad return on the investment. And I think that as we talk to our communities and we demonstrate that we're solving their problems, and we demonstrate that by having well-educated kids that aren't going to jail, we're building our stronger communities, that these are all ways that we secure our role as a vital community asset. I believe that this is the most exciting time in the history of education. And the reason for that is in part because we now have so much more information about what we bring to the table to help our communities. So one of my favorite Woody Allen quotes is that, we are at a crossroads more than any other time in history. On the one hand is utter hopelessness. On the other is total extinction. Let us hope we have the wisdom to choose wisely. And I believe, as I talk to many librarians around the country, many of them believe that. They think we're doomed. And I think this is the moment for us to reinvigorate ourselves, to reconnect to our community, to be proud of our civic contributions, to understand that we make our community stronger than they would be without us, and to celebrate the role that we play in America. So thank you. I'm happy to take questions. bought our platform, we started buying them directly. We now have about 35,000 titles. And I said to my board, this is a digital branch. And we're opening a new branch that's open 24 hours a day. And so there's an investment that goes into it. We have about 14,000 titles from Overdrive and 3M. We have 11,000 titles from those independent publishers. And we have 10,000 that we purchased as a bundle that are all self-published. And they're all flying, well, they're not flying off the shelf because there isn't a shelf. But they're all well used. Yes?
You have four numbers that you said were important. You have the national chapter. Other three, I have that 7 per year.
No, I don't, but any plans to get
What,
that?
well, we may have, it. What is it you're talking about? The four
So
numbers?
per capita.
Yeah, certain per capita.
It's in your data back.
What Lee Lance did was he pitched us the library journal, and when they come up with their 4-star ratings, that's what they're using.
I don't think we have stats per thousand, but we do have program per capita, visit per capita, per village per capita. No, hold on. And we have some national data.
Yeah, all this stuff is derived from all the numbers that the state libraries have.
Yeah. That was you.
So if you do a search for eligibility index, you'll find the data. Sure.
I'm going to figure from Rapid City. And we have what they call a Z collection, which is your good output. It's probably not going to be recredited unless you're Google or scanned it illegally. Or say $500 million fine and say, sorry, not very much. But even here, you know, you take all the digital stuff. And who in the hell is going to read all of it to see if it is any good, but they can get them reading it. Why, you know, you can learn more about less and less to find or everything but nothing. So here's the Z collection. So they put a fluid copy, they call it the Z collection, put it on the rack. Well, I thought it was supposed to be 3 or 4 times. Well, it's the same thing, those are 3 or 4 times, or maybe even 1,000. What are the libraries doing with this anymore?
Here's the problem. Well, most public libraries, I think when somebody, for instance, donates a book to the library, they think it's gone to the happy hunting ground, will be there forever. Okay? But when it's a physical book, no library has limitless space. You have to manage your space. And so what decision do you use about what to keep? And the answer typically is use. You want to remove things that are not used to make space for things else.
Because the libraries do a better job, they have to
Well, but the issue is that generally speaking, 80% of our business is what's new. It's what people, you know, they're looking for what's
But that's
current.
80% of your business, but what about the people who really want to know stuff?
And that's why it's digital. It's because once we start digitizing things,
Yeah, but
it is infinitely expensive.
You can't digitize that. You can't take a book like Roundup here and digitize that. I mean, it's in the family. You can't go ahead and steal it like iTunes, for instance. You know, it used to be Napster. That was illegal. Now iTunes is doing the same thing. So your granddaughter says, you know, I can get you that song for nothing. But I just killed it.
Well, there are a couple of issues. One of them is things fall into public domain. And typically it's at about the 40-year mark. And then it can be digitized. It's perfectly.
Yeah, but that family can keep it, you know, within that family too. So, I mean, it all doesn't go into public.
Most of it will eventually.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
We can go through that Z collection and, right?
But I look at it like this, that at some point we have to make a decision. How do you spend public dollars? And what's the effect that you want? Old doesn't necessarily mean valuable for a book. It may. And so at some point, if you have a dollar that has to go into something, there is a cost to the space that you give to host something. What do you want to happen to it? My belief is, my measurement for library success is what percentage of my stuff is out. I don't want it in the library. I want it in people's homes. And in some of our libraries, we've achieved 62% of the collection checked out. Typically, for most libraries, it's like 25. So yeah, there's a lot of decisions to be made. But I believe as we move forward, more and more of the books will be born digital, and we can keep them forever. Other questions? We're kind of eat.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.